Sanji is without a doubt one of the strongest on the Straw Hat Pirates, holding his spot in the top 3 with minimal effort. But in this specific top 3, including him, Zoro, and Luffy, there was a trait that the other two share, but Sanji doesn't as of yet, and that is Conqueror's Haki. Lately in the community, there has been a lot of discourse over Sanji's qualifications for Conqueror's Haki, and a certain scene is always brought up. Well, in today's video, let's dive into this scene and why its perception in the community is due to a misunderstanding. What's up guys, Russ Gambler here, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about Sanji's scene in the Baratie telling Zoro that he should just throw away his dream in order to live. This scene has been used negatively by a certain fandom in order to prove that Sanji isn't in possession of Conqueror's spirit, but I beg to differ. Before we get into it, guys, my analytics are literally worse than last time I showed them. If you're watching my videos and enjoying them, go ahead and subscribe. It's a win-win for both of us. So before we get into what the scene meant and what everybody got wrong, we have to set some context. At this point in the story, the Straw Hats are at the Baratie and they get visited by Don Krieg. Don Krieg orders for a couple thousand meals for his crew members because his entire fleet got violated by one pirate. As Jin, the right-hand man of Don Krieg, explains, he was a man of hawk eyes whose glare was sharp enough to kill a man. Zoro overhears the conversation and Zeff claims that it had to be the work of Mihawk himself. That's who Zoro had been chasing for years. He's the man Zoro needs to defeat in order to secure his place as the world's strongest swordsman. He expresses this out loud as well as Luffy saying he'll enter the Grand Line, and Sanji has something to say about it. He says that they're a bunch of idiots who are running towards their death, but Zoro isn't with that and tells him the only person who could call him an idiot is himself because as soon as he started chasing his ambition, he threw away his attachment to life. But Sanji doubles down saying that what he said was a load of crap. But notice Zeff's reaction to what Sanji said. I need you to keep that in mind for later because it is super important to the context of the upcoming scene. As soon as the meals Don Krieg asked for were given to the crew members, the same pirate who violated them the first time appears and cuts one of the ships in half. It's Dracula Mihawk. After overhearing that he is here, Zoro rushes in looking for smoke. We then commence the ultimate showing of disrespect in Zoro vs Mihawk. Zoro gets stabbed by the butter knife and proclaims that if he steps back, he'd be throwing away his ambition. He'd much rather die than do that. So Mihawk takes out his black blade and charges towards Zoro. There's a final clash and Mihawk comes out victorious. Mihawk turns around to finish him off, but Zoro turns around as well, and he gets slashed. Luffy and the others are all screaming out for Zoro, but Sanji just stands there, confused. Why the hell would he do such a thing? He then remembers what Zoro said to him and thinks to himself, if it's gonna mean your death, then just throw your damn ambition away. He says this out loud as well because of his frustration. That was it. That was the scene. And now let's get into what this scene is being used for in the community and what people interpret it as. From my understanding, people are using this scene to prove that Sanji has weak will and doesn't have the will of a conqueror, someone who put his life on the line for his dreams or ambition. I completely disagree with this because clearly this interpretation comes from just reading the words in the page rather than just adding the context that was shown throughout Baratie. So let's go into what this scene actually was. In order to do that, let's start off by revisiting Sanji's first backstory. I won't bore you by retelling the entire backstory, so I'll just highlight the parts that were important. It starts off with a 10-year-old Sanji enthusiastically telling the other chefs on the ship about the All Blue, a magical seed that had fish from all 4 blues. The chefs tell him that every chef's dream is to find it, and Sanji tells them that he'll go searching for it someday. However, the chefs assert that he won't be finding it because they think it doesn't exist, but Sanji stays firm on it because it's his dream. Just then, Red-Leg Zeff pulls up on the ship as to rob them and perform piracy, of course. While they wreak havoc, Sanji insists that he will not get killed by some pirates in the middle of nowhere, so he pulls up on them with a pair of knives. The chefs, who have no sense of drive towards their ambition, are telling him to calm down and not fight back, but Sanji says he's going to kill the pirates before they end up killing him. But of course, like Kizaru said in Marineford, you need strength to back up your effort and bravery. So Sanji gets violated, but Sanji crawls back, continues to try to fight, and he says words that you guys should keep in mind. I'm gonna find the All Blue someday. Let me explain it further. Sanji is fighting in order to fulfill his dream. But it doesn't end there because look at Zeff's reaction to that. He doesn't say anything while everyone else starts laughing at him. We all know what happens next. The ship starts sinking and Zeff saves Sanji, and now they're stranded on an island. He gives Sanji literally all of the food shares, and Zeff himself, well, he cuts his leg off and starts to eat it as compensation for his hunger. Notice what he says as he does it. So this is where even my red leg meets its end. Not understanding what I'm getting at? Well, let's look at what Sanji says after he finds out what Zeff did. After Zeff confirms that he cut his leg off and ate it, Sanji says, "You can't be a pirate anymore without a leg." Zeff then gives the reason he gave up his leg, and it was because him and Sanji both shared the same dream. Yes, that's exactly it. Zeff has given up his dream, finding the All Blue, to continue living. He cut off his leg, which means he can't continue pursuing his dream, and ate it, meaning he's just not willing to die pursuing it. He'd rather live. So by now you're either wondering why I went over this or realizing some of my point now. But let's continue nevertheless. In that backstory, we got a lot of stuff out of it. We find out about Sanji's dream, we find out Sanji's over-the-top will and drive to fulfill his dream, and we find out what Zeff did in exchange for his dream. So what does all this have to do with Sanji's scene during the Baratie? Well, remember Zeff's reaction to Sanji calling Zoro and Luffy idiots for willing to die fighting for their dreams? The reason for this reaction was because Sanji, literally 9 years ago, had that same ideology and drive. Why would Zeff laugh hearing this? Well, it's because Sanji was just like that before he met him. And so if you're not catching on to what I'm saying, Sanji's current ideology at that time of throwing away your ambition to live was something he adopted from Zeff. Zeff threw his ambition, finding the All Blue, away in order to live by cutting off his leg and eating it. Sanji wasn't like that. In fact, he was the exact opposite. When threats to his life came onto the ship, he went out fighting because he had a dream to fulfill. Sanji and Zeff were not the same, at all. The reason and the way this ideology was adopted by Sanji can be seen in his chivalry as well. We've already seen how he gained his chivalry from Zeff, and now it's the moral code he goes by. Zeff has a great influence on Sanji, and it's to no one's surprise that this ideology was adopted by him. After all, Zeff is like his father figure, so it's obvious that Sanji would unconsciously take after him. This is why Zeff laughs. The boy who just 9 years ago was fighting for his ambition is now calling others idiots for doing the same thing. It's ironic. But still, we aren't finished yet, because to put the nail in the coffin, we get a speech by Zeff while Sanji watches Luffy fight Don Krieg, which shows us that this was all Zeff's fault, and Sanji was born with greater will than him. In chapter 65, Don Krieg, who had pulled out a spear with a bomb, is being told that his weapon has been reduced to less than half of his might. He says that even if it is still more than enough to put Luffy down because he's bleeding all over from just 2 blasts. Sanji agrees, saying that it's impossible to fight Don Krieg because of all of his weapons. Right behind him, though, is Zeff. Zeff tells Sanji that no matter how many hundreds of weapons or armor someone has, it's all no match for the one special spear that comes from your guts. On the battlefield, where life and death is decided, the one who fears death and hesitates for even an instant shall fall to their doom. He refers to Luffy and says that he has zero hesitation in the face of death, and it might stem from his preparedness to survive no matter what, or, and get this, his conviction that fears no death. And that resonates with Sanji as he reacts to that one word, conviction, a word for belief or opinion. Next chapter, Luffy continues to fight tooth and nail and finally defeats Don Krieg while he falls into the water. And as soon as this happens, Zeff continues his speech, saying that if Don Krieg's weapons and armor are his might, then Luffy's spear that comes from his guts is his own might. Then finally, he ends the speech off with something very crucial to the overall point of this video. He says, "And I know a certain idiot who'd stifle that very spear for no good reason." Zeff is talking about Sanji here, and what in specific? Well, the fact that he suppressed that spear within him because Zeff did. That's the no good reason. That's why Sanji can't fathom fighting for your dream even if it means death, because he stifled his spear long ago. 9 years ago, he was doing just that. Then he saw Zeff do the opposite and adopted that mindset. Doing that unconsciously led to Sanji stifling his own spear, or in other words, his own guts, bravery, and will/drive to fulfill his dream. Why did Zeph laugh when he saw Sanji contradict his past self? Because he knows Sanji deep down is someone just like that. And that's the point of this speech, so that Sanji stops suppressing this spirit just because Zeph did. And so all in all, what I'm trying to say is that Sanji's words in this scene isn't representative of him himself. It's a reflection of Zeph. Sanji 9 years ago did the same thing, fighting tooth and nail because he wanted to fulfill his dream. And so this panel right here, this isn't what Sanji thinks, that's Zeph's ideology. And so we need to stop using this against Sanji because that's just not who he is. Sanji wasn't born with this weak shit in mind. No, he had that insane drive from the start, but it got suppressed because of Zeph's actions. Here are the chain of events that convey this. So first, Zeph laughs because Sanji is contradicting himself. After that, Sanji yells out something that contradicts his actions from years before. Then we get to see those actions from years before, as he does the same thing as Zoro did in this scene, not backing down because he wants to fulfill his dream. After that, we get Zeph's speech in order to get Sanji to stop stifling his own spirit because Zeph has noticed that this was all his doing. And it was the scene of Sanji calling Zoro an idiot that gave him the realization. He was the reason Sanji hadn't gone for his dream yet. And so he says, once again, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. No lie, this was my favorite video yet, and that's because this was something I used to talk about on my TikTok years ago, and now I have a bigger platform to express my thoughts on. So truly and honestly, I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you did, which I know since you made it this far, go ahead and leave a like and sub to the channel for more content like this. And I'll catch y'all in the next one. Okay, so I'm going to be explaining why this panel that I'm showing in the background right now does not mean